Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Kiorkof, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my Week 17 running back rankings for the 2020 fantasy football season. On today's episode, of course, we're going to be covering all things related to the running back position, beginning with matchups. We'll talk about which defenses are giving up the most points to opposing running backs thus far this season on average in a half PPR scoring format. After that, as we usually do, we will move on and talk about my top 36 running back rankings. Again, rankings are always subject to change, so if you're trying to stay up to date on my latest rankings, make sure that you show up Sunday morning, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Kickoff with Kiorkof will be live streaming here on the channel. So if you haven't yet already, click that subscribe button. Also click the bell notification button to be notified as soon as we go live. Also, there's different things that I do outside of the channel via Patreon and or the Discord server for those of you who are trying to access that. The link is down in the description. Outside of that, this is the final running back rankings video for 2020. I mean, obviously, when we get into 2021, we'll talk about what I anticipate to see next season and all these different types of videos, and then we'll get into the rankings for next year down in September. But regardless, I'm excited. Obviously, I've mentioned it on yesterday's video. If you do play in a Week 17 championship, hopefully going into the future, you're not going to be playing in a league in which you are participating in the final week of the regular season, because again, there are players that are going to be missing in today's rankings based on the fact that they may not be playing and or may be held out based on the fact that they don't want to injure a star player going into the future, or players may be getting pulled out earlier because it's just not worth risking their health. Either way, we'll talk about that as the episode proceeds. Either way, I want to thank you guys for the incredible support this season. 2020 has been made absolutely incredible, and it's just it's a testament to obviously the support that I've gotten from you guys. I cannot thank you guys enough. It's just been absolutely incredible. So thank you once again. For those of you who are not here for rankings and just here to just hang out, again, Happy New Year. The next time we see you should be exciting. Either way, Sunday morning, that's the next stream. Otherwise, I'm ready to talk about running backs going into Week 17 of the 2020 fantasy football season. Beginning off, let's talk about some matchups. Of course, we want to talk about the strength of schedule, seeing who has the easiest matchup at said position. Of course, the Houston Texans, Detroit Lions, Las Vegas Raiders, Jacksonville Jaguars are giving up the most points to opposing running backs this season. And to be honest, it's not really a surprise, and it honestly helps us this week because the top running backs have some of the easier matchups. Of course, Derrick Henry playing against Houston, Dalvin Cook playing against the Lions. We have Jonathan Taylor playing against the Jaguars. Melvin Gordon, who will not have Phillip Lindsay participating because he's on the injured reserve, will take on the Raiders. Again, there are matchups here that are definitely, hopefully, going to be taken advantage of. Montgomery playing against the Green Bay Packers. We have, of course, DeAndre Swift playing against the Minnesota Vikings. The Minnesota Vikings are coming off of a week in which they obviously got 7 rushing touchdowns scored against them. It's a pretty big number there. The Dallas Cowboys, of course, the Tennessee Titans. These are teams that have always given up big points this season on the ground, including the Carolina Panthers, the New York Giants. This shouldn't be a surprise to many of us as we've seen this every single week. So we'll mention these as we proceed through the video. Outside of that, I want to give you guys some perspective as to some of the tougher matchups going into the week. The New Orleans Saints, the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Washington football team, the Rams. These are teams that have kind of been grandfathered in, even though the Pittsburgh Steelers have given up 2 great running back performances in the last couple weeks, one to Jonathan Taylor and another to Giovani Bernard. It doesn't really matter because they've been grandfathered in based on averages. So even though they have not been up to par with their normal selves as of late, it is pretty apparent that there is an advantage to take in any single scenario. It does not matter, even if the New Orleans Saints have given up the fewest points. We've seen them give up points to Miles Sanders a couple weeks back at a pretty huge volume. So again, anybody can succeed against any defense. Just giving you some perspective as to, as of late, where it kind of all shakes down. Now that we've covered that, we can go ahead, move back to our, of course, our Week 17 running back rankings for a half PPR scoring format. Again, today's rankings should be a little bit shorter than we usually are because, again, a lot of the players here are guys that you're automatically starting in your Week 17 championship, and they have such easy matchups. So, again, we'll begin off with King Henry. Derrick Henry is our number 1 running back on the week. It should come to no surprise. He takes on the Houston Texans, giving up the most points to opposing running backs. And even though Derrick Henry did lose me a fantasy football championship last week with his 2-point performance in a half PPR scoring format in a snow game against the Green Bay Packers, which we may have thought he should have been able to succeed a little bit more in, he should be able to get back on track playing against the Houston Texans. If you go back, just look at the Houston Texans performances he's had earlier this season and going back to Week 17 of last season. There is a reason why Derrick Henry is feared in Houston, and he's definitely going to be putting up a pretty number against them. He's absolutely one of the best running backs in the National Football League, and I have no doubt in my mind that he should be carrying you to a championship if you have him on roster. We move on to our number 2 running back. It is Jonathan Taylor playing against the Jacksonville Jaguars. I mean, Jonathan Taylor in the last month has really found a resurgence in his career. He had a little bit of a slow start there. After about week 4, he really didn't get as much opportunity, wasn't playing well, obviously was put on the injured reserve. Then once he came back, he was really in a different set of circumstance, in my opinion. This offense was producing far better. They weren't having to rely upon the running game as much because Phillip Rivers was able to develop, as a quarterback and get more chemistry with this offense. And now that what we're seeing from the Indianapolis Colts is just complete efficiency, it obviously speaks to how good this offensive line is and how good Jonathan Taylor has been, putting up a fantastic performance against Pittsburgh last week. Nobody can stop him. He plays against Jacksonville. He should have another great performance. Again, it's exciting to see Jonathan Taylor take these steps because obviously this is feeding into next year's rankings, right? We want to see where he can potentially line up. He'll certainly be a first-round pick based on opportunity, based on this backfield and how effective this offense has been on the ground for the last couple seasons. Regardless, Jonathan Taylor, a for sure number 2 overall player this week because, again, he plays against Jacksonville. We move on to Dalvin Cook as our number 3. Now, Dalvin Cook was pretty much shortchanged this last week based on, of course, they were getting blown out by the New Orleans Saints. He didn't play in majority of the fourth quarter. We had Michael Boone steal, a touchdown. It's going to happen. These are things that are going to happen in fantasy football. And even though it happened in week 16, which for many of us was a very valuable week, it doesn't really bother me. I think, these are the ebbs and flows of fantasy football. But this upcoming week, this is going to be a big wave going in the direction of people who have Dalvin Cook on roster, playing against the Detroit Lions, giving up the second most points to opposing running backs. Just got destroyed by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers just in the first half alone. I mean, Brady could not be stopped. But either way, I think if in fact the Lions are without Matthew Stafford, their offense is going to be struggling. Their defense has struggled all season long for the last couple seasons. It's going to be a blowout. I mean, go look at what Dalvin Cook did to them last time. I mean, he put up a fat number. I can certainly see him doing that again, and I could also see him being benched in the third quarter because it gets out of hand, and they want to keep him healthy. But regardless, I think in 3 quarters, what Dalvin Cook can do is a lot more than a lot of running backs can do in a 4-quarter span. He is my number 3. And we move on to number 4. We have Alvin Kamara. So here's the thing about Alvin Kamara. He is coming off of a giant week. Again, that's fantastic, but we have to just take it into perspective as to what exactly we can anticipate. Are we going to see a 6-touchdown week again? Probably not. What we'll probably see is the New Orleans Saints pretty much gain a significant lead against the Carolina Panthers and then use a lot of Latavius Murray like they did last week. Now, Latavius Murray played great last week, but I honestly think that Alvin Kamara could probably come out, get 2 touchdowns, then put on the bench and go home and just be fine. Because again, this team is sure trying to lock down the number 1 seed in the AFC, but I don't think that the Carolina Panthers are going to make it difficult for them because again, the Carolina Panthers have struggled over the last couple weeks, especially against division rivals. So again, as of right now, Alvin Kamara, a for sure start, as we all know, and in a pretty advantageous matchup to say the very least, but I don't think he's going to be given the 6-touchdown opportunity like he was last week because again, that is one of the greatest performances in fantasy football history for a reason. We have David Montgomery as our number 5. Again, Montgomery, similar to Jonathan Taylor, in the last 4 to 5 weeks, based on their schedule. Strength of schedule has been a huge thing, and that's why we talk about it every single episode. David Montgomery's taken over based on his schedule, and with the opportunities that he's been given, has been absolutely nuclear in terms of fantasy productivity. What he's done in the last 5 games surpasses everything that he did the entire games before this season alone. So again, he has been absolutely unbelievable in his second year, playing against the Green Bay Packers once again. I think regardless of where this matchup goes, whether it is Green Bay blowing them out and David Montgomery getting garbage time or this being a closer contest, the fact that David Montgomery is getting work in the passing game, scoring touchdowns, and getting a boatload of opportunity all just continues to lead him in the right direction in terms of fantasy productivity. I think he's an absolutely fantastic play and a for sure start this week. Nick Chubb's our number 6. Now, even though this last week wasn't a great week for the Cleveland Browns, I think they'll be able to bounce back. Again, playing against a division rival, this is a huge game for the Cleveland Browns because they could potentially miss the playoffs here if, in fact, they are not to capture a win here. There's always these different things, different scenarios in which something can go wrong and they could lose and be out. So I think they'll be out to play. Hopefully their wide receivers are back. The way I see it, Nick Chubb against the Pittsburgh Steelers, like I mentioned a little bit earlier in this episode, we talked about Jonathan Taylor and Giovani Bernard in the last 2 weeks putting up great numbers against that Pittsburgh front 7. I think there's a very good chance that Nick Chubb will be given a bunch of running opportunity, and he'll take advantage of that and put up some good numbers against the Pittsburgh Steelers, a division rival. So I'm not worried about him. Of course, there is Kareem Hunt who could come in and take some opportunity here and there, but the fact that Nick Chubb's getting more and more work in the passing game continues to increase his potential floor, and in that gives me even more confidence in starting him. We have Aaron Jones as our number 7. Of course, we talk about Aaron Jones every week. This is a guy that has such high upside with the ability to score and how effective this offense has been, but he could also disappear because of the matchup. If in fact they are winning by a significant margin, Devontae Adams comes out and scores another 3-touchdown game early in the first quarter, and Aaron Jones becomes a guy that you have to bench because you want to keep him healthy for the NFL playoffs, then the Green Bay Packers are going to do that, and they're going to use A.J. Dillon. So again, that is why Aaron Jones is a little bit lower than he typically is in this top 12 conversation. Again, Aaron Jones can certainly come out any given week and score a touchdown, 70 yards, averaging a huge number in terms of yard per carry this season as of late. So as of right now, of course, a fantastic play against the Chicago Bears. Did very well against them last time, and hopefully this week can at least capture himself a touchdown, and then he can go sit on the bench and rest for the NFL playoffs. We move on to Austin Ekeler as our number 8. Austin Ekeler scoring a touchdown last week was a pretty good surprise. I'll take that because, to be honest, he really needed that. He hasn't scored a touchdown in a very long time, to say the very least. Basically because this offense hasn't been very efficient, and down on the goal line, he's not the guy that's going to get the ball. That's Kalen Ballage as of right now, and hopefully that'll change in the future, but I don't think that's going to be the case. They don't want to give this smaller running back opportunities like such. Carolina does it with Christian McCaffrey, but again, to each their own, they're going to make their decisions. I think Austin Ekeler, regardless, playing against the Kansas City Chiefs, who will be missing majority of their offensive starters and probably defensive starters, just seems to me that Austin Ekeler could easily come out, have himself a pretty big game against this defense. They play against them multiple times a year. They found themselves comfort in it. Even earlier this season, in week 2, when they play against the Chiefs, Austin Ekeler's stat line looked great. Got himself a bunch of yards on the ground, through the air. Obviously didn't score a touchdown. If he can accompany himself a touchdown in his performance, becomes an even more viable play this week. We have David Johnson as our number 9. Now, if we want to talk about running backs who have had unbelievable fantasy playoff, performances, it's David Johnson. 2 weeks back in week 15, 11 receptions on 11 targets for 100 plus receiving yards. This past week had over 100 rushing yards on just 11 carries. Yes, and he had himself a rushing touchdown, a couple catches through the air, 3 targets, 3 receptions. He's caught all 14 targets in the last 2 games. So as it currently stands, with this Houston Texans offense taking on the Tennessee Titans, sure, Derrick Henry is going to be playing well, but I think on the opposite side, there is going to be a huge opportunity for David Johnson to feast against this defense that, just going back to Sunday's game on Sunday night, the Tennessee Titans cannot stop the run. It was proven by Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon and that Green Bay Packers offense. I think it's been a fact all season long that Tennessee's defense has been the weakest part of that entire team, and will be exposed once again as David Johnson potentially has himself a third performance in which we could potentially take into 2021 with a little bit more excitement based on what he has done as of late. We have Myles Sanders at number 10. Again, Myles Sanders didn't have the greatest performance this past week, especially on the ground in terms of yardage. But hey, when you accompany your performance with a touchdown, you are going to get yourself into the conversation of a top 12 guy every single week. And though this week he plays against the Washington football team, a front seven and a defense that has been absolutely fantastic against running backs this entire season, and especially as of late, the question remains, what can we anticipate from a guy like Myles Sanders? I think the fact that, of course, Jalen Hurts is in this offense running the ball effectively as he has all season long, it does open up more opportunity for a guy like Myles Sanders. This is a must-win game for both these teams. Of course, the Eagles have been mathematically eliminated, but it's always fun to be able to impede one of your division rivals from making the playoffs. I think they'll come out. They're going to be trying their best, of course, playing for their head coach and this new quarterback that has kind of given life to this offense. I think Myles Sanders is certainly a great play. He's gotten himself great opportunity. In terms of his targets as of late, those numbers continue to increase in comparison to what he was with Carson Wentz. So as of right now, his floor continues to rise. His touchdown upside is always there, and he is certainly my number 10 this week. We move on to Myles Gaskin, the thumbnail himself. So Myles Gaskin had an incredible performance on Saturday night against the Las Vegas Raiders. Besides the fact that he had 2 receiving touchdowns, 5 catches on 5 targets for 80-plus receiving yards, and got himself a significant amount of touches on the ground. Just going back and looking at what Myles Gaskin did this past week in comparison to where he left off, it's like he never left. They're giving him the identical amount of touches. He is a workhorse. In definition, he is getting more than 20 touches per game, and that in itself is irreplaceable, which makes me think, regardless of the matchup, playing against the Buffalo Bills this week, Myles Gaskin is a absolutely fantastic play, and for sure, my number 11. We move on to our number 12, Jeff Wilson Jr., a guy that was a little bit on the fence this last week because, again, it was technically a tougher matchup, but he certainly ran through it. In the couple games that he has had the opportunity to be the starting lead back of the San Francisco 49ers, he's certainly taken advantage of it. I mean, we go back to that New England Patriots game earlier this season, 100-plus yards, 3 touchdowns, and then just look at this last week's game in which he should have had 2 touchdowns, and, obviously he had himself over 100 rushing yards, but then he had himself 1 catch for 21 yards and a receiving touchdown. So again, there are performances here that Jeff Wilson has put up, and I think he'll once again do this upcoming week. Now, the question is, are the 49ers up to the task against the Seattle Seahawks, who have been fantastic all season long on the ground? I honestly see it as a pretty easy matchup. If, in fact, Jeff Wilson can find his footing early and not have to really worry about, going down early in terms of the score, and then the 49ers having to abandon the running game, because that's really where their bread and butter is. When they can run the ball effectively in the second half and maintain the lead, that's where they find themselves in their most advantageous position. Hopefully Jeff Wilson will be fine, even though, again, Seattle has succeeded against that secondary all season long. It could be a tough one for their defense. We have Josh Jacobs as our number 13. Josh Jacobs is coming off of an absolutely terrible week. And you know what? It happens. Josh Jacobs is a good running back. We know this. In terms of what this offense wants to do, they want to run the ball. They want to impose their will on the ground. But it just wasn't apparent last week against the Miami Dolphins. They weren't able to find much success on the ground. And I don't blame them. The Miami Dolphins defense is great. And they play against the Denver Broncos this week. And is Josh Jacobs going to have himself a bounce back week here? Perhaps that's the case. But as it currently stands, I think number 13 is a pretty safe spot for him because, sure, he can get himself a touchdown, get himself 60 yards, a couple catches, and he gets himself 12 to 13, 14 points and a half PPR scoring format. And that's where I kind of anticipate him being. If he goes for the upside, then sure, so be it. But I think just to be safe, I really do like these other running backs ahead of him. I think the matchup, though he has succeeded against it earlier this season, which, of course, him and Devontae Booker both succeeded so much where that game was completely out of hand, a 40-7 game, if I'm not mistaken, in the favor of the Las Vegas Raiders. I still think that, Josh Jacobs could be in similar fashion to where he performs, is pulled, and then we'll see him next season. We have J.K. Dobbins as our number 14. Number 14, J.K. Dobbins, is mainly because he is as consistent as possible. When we want to talk about consistency at the running back position, I am so happy that they have given him the starting job. And though majority of the second halves that he has played as of the last couple of weeks have been, either a really big shootout where he's not really involved because they're passing the ball as heavily as they have this season, or they're so far ahead that Gus Edwards is taking the job. Now, the question is, what can we anticipate from J.K. Dobbins, in this upcoming week? When you play against the Cincinnati Bengals, a team that just gave up over, 10 yards per carry to David Johnson, it's probably going to be a pretty exciting, game for J.K. Dobbins. But what has he averaged in the last couple of weeks? It's about 13 to 14 fantasy points a game. He's getting about 60 to 70 rushing yards every single contest, including with another rushing touchdown. Again, I think that's 5 consecutive games for himself with a rushing touchdown. He's getting himself about 13 points. That in itself, in my opinion, lands him in the number 14 spot, in which he certainly has himself opportunity for upside. But regardless, I think he's just such a safe play as of right now, and an exciting one to say the very least. Melvin Gordon is our number 15, playing against the Las Vegas Raiders. Again, the Las Vegas Raiders have been one of the worst teams against the run. They've been giving up all the points to running backs all season long, and that has not changed. Myles Gaskin is another running back that can prove that. Now, of course, Myles Gaskin got majority of his work in the passing game, but why not Melvin Gordon in the passing game? He's certainly been able to prove that he's capable of doing that in his entire career, and especially this season, a part of this Denver Broncos offense. So as it currently stands, I don't think that, there's any limitations to his potential. I think the only limitation is whether this offense can get him down into the red zone, because if you go back, a couple weeks, he's performed against the Miami Dolphins, which is a tougher defense. He's performed against the Buffalo Bills and put up fantastic numbers and scored touchdowns. So again, I think Melvin Gordon, who has been a little bit of a sleeper running back in this late half of the season, has a great opportunity against the Las Vegas Raiders to put up a great performance as my number 15. Number 16, Chris Carson. So this is my entire thought process here. Playing against the Arizona Cardinals could be a very easy game. I mean, Jeff Wilson Jr. just torched them, but with Chris Carson sharing some snaps, splitting some stuff, not playing well in the last couple weeks, really hasn't had a great performance, in the last 2 weeks. I think that's why he sits at 16, because I'm worried, because I know that this offense, though they want to run the ball right now, and late in the season, they always kind of move away from Russell Wilson and try to run the ball more and more every single game. It seems to me that Chris Carson, even when given said opportunity, doesn't fully take advantage of it as of late. So hopefully he can bounce back and have himself a great performance, but I drop him in terms of my rankings in comparison to where I usually have him, which is typically in the top 12, because again, the performances as of late haven't really convinced me that he is up to par with his normal self of production, and especially his opportunity. We have DeAndre Swift as our number 17. If Matthew Stafford's back, I think DeAndre Swift jumps in these rankings. But the fact that he's not, and in practice he's probably going to miss because it is the final game of the season in an irrelevant game, leads to me the idea that, okay, it's either going to be David Blau and or Chase Daniel. Now, I don't think either of those quarterbacks are efficient enough to help them defeat the Minnesota Vikings. But the one thing that I will say is that the Minnesota Vikings proved last week that they can't stop the run. And though they'll try to fix it, I don't think they'll be able to, because it is more of a, it's more than just a weekly fix. This is an entire structure of their defense, the coordinator, the players they have, everything there just doesn't, gel. And it hasn't gelled all season long in comparison to what the Minnesota's defense has been in years prior. So either way, I think DeAndre Swift can certainly produce when given the opportunity. It's just a matter of if this offense is going to be relevant enough to give him opportunity down in the red zone, to get himself more efficiency in the passing game. If this offense is just inept and can't do anything, then of course DeAndre Swift will suffer for it. But I don't think that'll be the case this week. I think they'll be far better. All right, we have Antonio Gibson as number 18. I think Antonio Gibson kind of was limited to an extent last week. Of course, J.D. McKissic had himself a huge week, and that's why I have Antonio Gibson here, because J.D. McKissic in the last 2 performances has been incredible, and Antonio Gibson, though he's coming back from an injury, isn't going to be pushed to get himself 25 carries. That's not going to be the case, even in a matchup against the Philadelphia Eagles, which he certainly could end up having himself a pretty good game here if given the entire backfield share, but I don't think that's going to be the case. I think he'll be limited in his touches. I think he'll have a similar amount of work that he did last week. Maybe his upside's 15 total touches, running and receiving, and I think that in itself, accompanied with a touchdown, could end up being fine. Of course, they're working on their 4th quarterback this season as they cut Dwayne Haskins earlier this week. It's going to be tough for this offense to move the ball technically, but I honestly think if they rely upon Antonio Gibson, it should be easier for them. Ezekiel Elliott's my number 19. Now, Zeke had himself a 100-yard rushing game this past week against the Philadelphia Eagles, and though that's fantastic, the question remains, is Zeke on track to potentially get back into the end zone, get himself more opportunity? Tony Pollard seems to have disappeared with Ezekiel Elliott's health back and ready to go. So obviously they've committed back to him, but the question is Zeke at the point where he can absolutely have a good game against anybody? Can he walk into this matchup against the New York Giants and perform well, who are giving up the 10th most points to opposing running backs this season in a half PPR scoring format? I think that's definitely a possibility. Touchdowns, that is out, but that's up to the potential chance, whether it's circumstance of him getting down there. Zeke's never been a guy that's going to bust out a 70-yard run for a touchdown in a single play. That's never been his case. That's never been his forte. It's a matter of getting the ball down the field efficiently with Andy Dalton and giving him the opportunity. With that, I think, of course, they want to throw the ball a lot. I think they'll continue to throw the ball as much as they have in the last couple of weeks, which leans me towards, yes, Zeke is going to be a good play this week, but not as great as many people may think, in my opinion. We have J.D. McKissic as our number 20. Again, I mentioned it. J.D. McKissic has, some unbelievable weeks. He scored a touchdown each of the last 2. He's getting a great amount of touches, whether it's on the ground or through the air. And regardless of what you think, I think J.D. McKissic is such a huge part of this offense, with Terry McLaurin potentially going to miss again. It's between him, Logan Thomas, and Antonio Gibson as viable fantasy options. And I think J.D. McKissic has been such a ingrained part of this offense that at this point, there's no way that he's not getting at least 6 catches plus with the potential upside of a touchdown with work on the ground. Of course, limiting Antonio Gibson's total work load and share. So as of right now, I think J.D. McKissic for sure a great play. We have Kareem Hunt as our number 21. So Kareem Hunt coming off of a decent week against the Jets, getting up, 12 fantasy points and a half PPR. I'll take that. Getting himself some work in the passing game. The question is, what is he capable of doing against Pittsburgh? I think Pittsburgh is a fantastic defense, but are they one of those defenses that can stop just about anybody? Sure, but I honestly think that the Cleveland Browns will play better based on the fact that, Pittsburgh hasn't been this defense that we're all afraid of. Earlier this season, I wouldn't dare start a running back against them. But now that we've gotten to this point, now that I've seen what Pittsburgh really is defensively and that they've kind of shown some weaknesses, I think a lot of teams, specifically a Kevin Stefanski offense, which is predicated on running the ball, they'll definitely be able to key in on those mistakes and be able to take advantage of it. That is why Kareem Hunt's my number 21. We have 22, Giovani Bernard, a guy that is coming off of 2 back-to-back incredible performances, even though Samaje Perine this past week, playing against the Houston Texans, had himself a pretty relevant game with 2 touchdowns. Giovani Bernard still got himself 16 fantasy points when another running back went for 24. So again, this backfield has been fantastic. This offense, even with Brandon Allen returning to the quarterback position, was far better. They ended up putting up, 37 points in a victory against the Houston Texans. I think even though they play against the Baltimore Ravens, it just seems to me that Giovani Bernard's utilization, his opportunity, it continues to stay as square as possible and gives me enough confidence that regardless of the matchup, I'm firing him up in this specific scenario. We have Leonard Fournette as our number 23. Now, Leonard Fournette, even though he has been, in my opinion, a top 12 back each the last 2 weeks because of the matchups and the opportunity, obviously with Ronald Jones being out. Ronald Jones does return this week. He has been activated from the injured reserve. So the question is Leonard Fournette going to be given the entire workload? I don't think he'll 100% be given the entire workload, but he should be dominating maybe 70% of it. And with that, against the Atlanta Falcons, we've seen him 2 weeks back score 2 touchdowns, 60 yards, get himself work in the passing game. That is all we can ask for. Leonard Fournette should be able to have himself a good week, maybe a great week if in fact he finds himself in the end zone multiple times. We have Kenyan Drake as our number 24. Closing out the top 24 running backs, it was tough for me because, again, there are a lot of running backs that could take this spot, but I think Kenyan Drake playing against the Los Angeles Rams. The Rams may be playing Blake Bortles at quarterback. They will not have Cooper Kupp. They will not have Jared Goff. Maybe Cam Akers is out. This is going to be a tough task for the Rams, and I think if, in fact, the Arizona Cardinals can find their stride, which Kenyan Drake has done multiple times against this Los Angeles Rams defense in the last 2 years, I think Kenyan Drake can certainly find himself some success. So, again, even though he has been awful in the last 2 weeks in terms of overall productivity, finding the end zone has not been his knack in the last 2 weeks, even though in the latter half of the season, he's been able to do that multiple times. It's just a matter of, can he find himself some momentum, be given an ample amount of touches, and score? I think it's more likely to happen than not this week. We have James Conner as our number 25. Now, if we say, let's look at the numbers of what Pittsburgh did to the Cleveland Browns earlier this season. We had James Conner with 101 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. Now, even though that's the case, this is not the same Pittsburgh Steelers offense. This is an offense that does not want to run the ball and refuses to feed the ball to their running backs. And with that being said, I think James Conner can't be relied upon as much as we want to. Again, he had himself a handful of touches, okay? Literally a handful of touches. And yes, he fell into the end zone and got himself a couple catches, but it's nothing to say, hey, you know what? That performance leads me to believe that he's 100% their starting running back and going to get workload carries. That's not the case. He is getting 10 touches a game if he's lucky. I mean, to be honest, if he's lucky, he's getting 10 touches a game. And that in itself scares me. So even though I love James Conner and I've loved him all season long, and I think he's a fantastic running back in this offense that they've built, the offense has leaned away from the running game so much that I just can't trust it. And that's why he sits at 25. With that being said, it's not to say that he is not capable of scoring, because all he needs is the green light and he's good to go. We have number 26, Gus Edwards. Speaking of the green light, he gets the green light every single fourth quarter / late third because, as of late, the Baltimore Ravens have maintained leads, except for that Cleveland Browns game. Of course, that was a higher scoring one, and Gus Edwards was not a relevant prospect in that contest. As of right now, it seems to me that Gus Edwards is a part of every single game plan, whether it's to kill the clock in the second half or to be a change of pace back with a heavy shoulder that's just leaning and running people over. He's going to continue to be used. He'll always have touchdown upside, and certainly will be touching the ball a lot in this upcoming game, second half, as they beat up the Cincinnati Bengals. We have Mike Davis as our number 27. Against the New Orleans Saints, he did not have much success earlier this season. Curtis Samuel stole a touchdown, if you guys remember that. But again, Mike Davis, as of late, just hasn't been it. He is not getting the right amount of touches through the air to give himself a solidified floor. Mr. Christian McCaffrey's probably not going to return. And the offense, again, is probably going to struggle against this New Orleans Saints defense. So as of right now, number 27 seems like a safe spot. I do think that he always will have upside of a touchdown if Teddy Bridgewater doesn't want to fumble it on the 1 yard line. But all in all, I do think that Mike Davis has himself a pretty good chance of putting up a decent performance, but nothing that makes me want to start him as a top 24 back for sure. Nyheim Hines is my number 28. I like Nyheim Hines a lot, mainly because, again, regardless of what happens in the matchup, who they play against, he's always getting touches through the air and on the ground. That in itself being, a change of pace back, a third down back, getting at least, 8 to 10 points per week, that leaves you in this, running back 3 conversation. And I think he's certainly proven to himself and to many of us that he is a valuable part of that offense and a huge fantasy prospect that you can rely upon on any given week. In a full PPR, obviously he's got more value. Playing against the Jacksonville Jaguars this week, he will touch the ball a lot as this offense is going to be rolling through them, to say the very least. We have Zach Moss as our number 29. Again, having another touchdown this past week is fantastic. Playing against the Miami Dolphins, that's a tougher one. Earlier this season against the Dolphins, this offense was not able to move the ball on the ground. Through the air, different conversation. So as of right now, as it currently stands, I think Zach Moss can certainly be able to score, but it's a matter of if he's going to get touches. Getting himself 12 touches on the ground per game, that's not going to be enough if he doesn't score a touchdown. Getting 60 yards is great, 5 yards per carry, but if in fact the touchdown doesn't accompany it, that is why he is as volatile as he is, and that is why he sits down in these specific rankings. We have number 30, A.J. Dillon. So, like I talked about yesterday in the video, I think it's going to go one of two ways. I think A.J. Dillon's going to be given the opportunity in the second half once the Green Bay Packers take their lead. Aaron Jones will be hitting the bench. And of course, they're going to want to run the ball with A.J. Dillon like they did with Jamal Williams earlier this season against Chicago. 17 times, 73 yards and a touchdown. I think A.J. Dillon could be given that opportunity. And if in fact that's the case, my goodness, he proved last week that he can run against anybody. The Malcolm Brown situation. So with Jared Goff having surgery and them having a backup quarterback and them having no Cooper Kupp and playing against the Arizona Cardinals, it seems to me like whoever it is, whether it's Malcolm Brown or Cam Akers, I'm going to have a tough time trusting them because I can already barely trust this offense as a whole as of late. So playing against the Arizona Cardinals, not as enticing, but if in fact he can fall into the end zone, again, this is the biggest if he can fall into the end zone, if this offense can somehow muster up a victorious game against the Arizona Cardinals, it's going to be tough to do with a lot of your offensive starters out. I think Malcolm Brown could be a valuable option there in this specific game. We have LaMichael Perine, running back of the New York Jets, with Frank Gore out in Week 17. This might be Frank Gore's final season. We never know, but LaMichael Perine is going to be the starting running back here, playing against the New England Patriots. Again, the Patriots in 3 consecutive weeks have not been playing well. I think LaMichael Perine will certainly be playing well because the Jets are a completely different monster. They have definitely kind of stepped up in the last 2 weeks, beating 2 teams with a total of 19 wins this season. So why not be able to beat a division rival and get a victory over Bill Belichick? I think that'll definitely be, in the realm of possibility. We have Latavius Murray as a number 33. Like I mentioned with Alvin Kamara, you're playing against the Carolina Panthers. I mean, anybody can produce against them on the ground. I think Latavius Murray, out of all running backs, can certainly do so, and he'll be given the opportunity to do so. They're going to lead in the first half. They're going to go into the second half and give Latavius Murray a bunch of touches. Even in first half of contests, we've seen this guy catch screen passes and go to the house and score. So regardless, we've seen Latavius Murray in this offense be very productive. I think he'll just be given extra opportunity this week, which will increase his total floor value. We have Wayne Gallman as our number 34. Even though I wanted to rank Wayne Gallman a little bit higher, playing against the Dallas Cowboys, one of the easiest matchup, I just can't trust it because, again, Wayne Gallman isn't a running back that makes me think, hey, he's a guy that I could 100% trust. Or maybe, I would say maybe 4 weeks back, that was the case. But in the last 2 weeks, he's had less than 10 touches per game. He's sharing the backfield. This offense is very inefficient. And though this is a matchup which should be an easy pick up and play, I think Wayne Gallman just sits in that little bit of a tough spot for me because I don't want to maybe perhaps start him when I need a must-win scenario. We have Ronald Jones as our number 35. So again, Ronald Jones will be returning from the injured reserve. Should be good to go. It's a matter of whether or not he's going to be given enough touches. I think Ronald Jones could be, kind of at least warmed up for the playoffs. And they could give him a good amount of touches to at least get him back into the flow of the game. But he's definitely not going to be the lead back, and that's why I sit him at 35. The last option I wanted to mention is Darrel Williams. He will potentially be the starting running back of the Chiefs for this week. Again, Clyde Edwards will be returning in the NFL playoffs. That is not to worry because, again, Clyde Edwards missed last week. He'll miss this week, and in the first week of the NFL playoffs, the Chiefs will have a bye, and then so he'll have an entire month off practically. Darrel Williams, Le'Veon Bell, whether it's one or the other, I think Darrel Williams seems to be the guy that is probably trending towards leading this backfield. All right, those are my Week 17 running back rankings for the 2020 fantasy football season. Thank you everybody for watching. I do appreciate you guys supporting the channel. Tomorrow we'll be talking about wide receivers. Thursday tight ends because there is no Thursday night game, and then we'll have Friday quarterbacks. Thank you everybody for watching, and until next time, I'll see you guys. Peace.